doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
So I'm going to turn to Nick Firzli now, who's the Director General of the World Pensions Council, because he, one, he has a time constraint, so he's going to have to dash back now, and two, he is also on the World Bank's board of the Global Infrastructure Investment Facility. Over to you, Nick, to share some very brief comments.
Thank you, Hubert, and I'll make it very concise, and I want to say that everything I'm going to say now is only and solely under my own personal capacity. It's a reflection of my own personal opinions. But very quickly, I think it's great what we heard from Ghana, because Ghana is in many ways an exemplary nation, and we can learn a lot from them. And what I mean by that is the following. You may have seen that 4 days ago, Euro Money magazine published this quarterly ECR, Euro Money Country Risk Survey, which is very interesting. And in the latest Euro Money Risk Survey, of course, because of the COVID-19 and all the lockdowns and the recession, all nations in the rankings are going down. So really all countries are collapsing because, of course, in the past 2-3 months, all the GDP growth projections for both OECD and developing nations collapsed, and it's normal that all the country risk metrics have gone down dramatically in the past 2-3 months. But there are a few exceptions. So there are a few countries that actually which practically did not go down. So what are they and why are they different from the others? And that handful, that very small handful of jurisdictions which were not heavily downgraded like the rest of the world are, predictably Sweden and Switzerland, right? But also Hungary, Israel, and Ghana. So fascinatingly, Hungary and Ghana and Israel were only downgraded a little bit in their country risk metrics. And that's really fascinating. So what I mean to say is that when a crisis comes, some countries that are doing things really well before the crisis, they'll be shielded from the crisis to a certain extent. And so what Ghana has going for it is, for example, that the rule of law, the respect for the sanctity of private property in Ghana, I'm sorry, it's like much better, not only that, much better than many African countries, but it's even better than some rich, developed European countries. I think it's very important if you want to attract investment from foreign pension funds or sovereign funds, to be able to prove that you have independent courts of law. So if one day something goes sour, so if you have a PPP with the Ghana Ministry of Transportation, or if you have a PPP with a certain Ghanaian municipality, if something goes wrong in the investment one day, if you as a foreign pension fund go to court, you will go to court in Ghana before a completely impartial judge who will respect the sanctity of private property, even when that's owned by a foreigner. So that's very important. Another quick remark that I would like to make, and I think I want to praise John as an Australian, is that what's really great about Australia, and what makes Australia much different than Britain, and I think Hubert, you mentioned, Britain, and in England or in Britain, so far, the results, of their attempts to pool infrastructure money into infrastructure, these results have been a little bit disappointing. And in my personal opinion, it's not only Britain. In most countries, except perhaps Australia, and to a lesser extent Canada. So only have two countries, Australia and Canada. For the rest of the world, these attempts to pool pension money into infrastructure platforms hasn't been a big success. And why? In my personal opinion, one of the reasons is financial regulation. And we're all using these Basel II and Solvency II and whatever, Basel III and Solvency III ways. And what governments do, they force asset owners, they force pension funds and insurance companies to use these risk-weighted asset metrics to evaluate risk on their balance sheet, and they're not realizing that by doing so, by using the Basel and solvency framework, they're really castrating investors, and it's a big problem because on the one hand, you have the same government who's telling pension funds and banks and insurance companies, yeah, go ahead, do like the Australians, put more money in infrastructure, and it's really schizophrenic because the same government is telling them, oh no, we're using Basel III and Solvency IV, and therefore we have to completely limit, the risky asset allocation. To conclude, my personal view is I think we have to stop the schizophrenia and all get together and loosen these counterproductive Basel and solvency risk measurement metrics, because the financial regulators then they blindly follow them as if it were the gospel, and they impose them upon the pension funds and insurance companies, and they hinder their capacity to invest in productive long-term assets like SME finance and infrastructure. So I think, if the crisis can be used to put pressure on policymakers and governments, I think we should all do it.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.